I could ever want, all the fun I could ever want was up in that treehouse. But I wasn't that good at climbing. I just love the idea of a treehouse. I have two older brothers, and they were much better at climbing than me. If I tried to get up in a tree, I'd either fall as soon as I tried to start, couldn't even really get up to the first branch, or I would just quit because I was scared of heights, and I still am pretty scared of heights. The first one of us that built a treehouse was my brother Andrew. He was in the woods with his friend Arthur. I don't know what they thought. They were knights or something. You got King Arthur, you got Andrew. They're in the woods. They're messing with Dad's tools without asking him. That's already trouble. They're trying to build this treehouse, but you know what? They don't even know how to use a hammer and nail. They're going to be in big trouble. So they're trying to build this treehouse, and of course, then we hear some screaming. Help! Help! Ah! Help! 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 And we go over, and my brother has a nail sticking out of his leg. And he's crying. So I don't know what I was doing. I was just trying to build it. We get the nail out, maybe a couple stitches, he's fine. A couple years later, same brother actually he's playing soccer. He tries to jump really high in an indoor stadium to grab a ball. It's a long story, but he jumps up, slams his hand, another nail goes through his hand. He has a bad run trying to get up in high places. But the point is that young boys and young kids in general love exploring and going high. But at what cost? At what cost? Going high can be very dangerous, too. Y'all remember I grew up in Ohio, and now I've been in North Carolina for 20 years. And when you look at Ohio license plates and North Carolina license plates, there's one thing they have in common. Ohio says, birthplace of flight. You know, and what does North Carolina say? First in flight. You see, they're fighting over who has the rights to the Wright brothers. Because they grew up in Ohio, and then, of course, they come to North Carolina, they come to Kitty Hawk, Philadelphia Hills, and that's where they try out their plane. But if you know anything about them, you know it wasn't all easy for them. Going high is costly. Trying to explore the heavens can come at a high, high cost. The story of the Bible, as we've talked about before, the story of the Bible is the story of a God who chooses to dwell with his people. He doesn't have to, but he chooses to come close to us and to provide a way for us to be with him. First, God creates this garden, this place where he puts Adam, and then later Eve, to be in this garden where he can be close with them, where man and woman can be face to face with God. Face to face with God. And when that failed, then God gave Noah a plan for an ark. And he gave them another chance, another way that they could be with him again, that they would be protected and safe, and that they could worship him and seek his face and even encounter him in their earthly life. And then you fast forward later, and God is showing up to Abraham. And God is calling Abraham to erect altars. What's an altar? It's a miniature holy mountain, a way to go up to be with God. Because you see, every time that God creates an environment where we can be with him, like a garden or the tabernacle or the temple, he creates that environment, but then he invites us to go further in and further up. He calls us up. As Paul says in Philippians, he calls us, he has a calling that is heavenward. He calls us heavenward in Christ Jesus. Even Adam and Eve, if you remember, if you read it really carefully in Genesis 2, God places Adam in a garden that's east of Eden. You know, a lot of times we think the Garden of Eden is equivalent to Eden, but it's not. They're two different things. It's like saying Guilford County and Greensboro. Greensboro is in Guilford County, but Guilford County is even bigger than that. Eden is even bigger than the garden. And we're told that the 4 rivers flow out from Eden. And Adam and Eve are in the garden. And if you read closely, what that would mean is that the garden is below the rivers, the river source, because the rivers are flowing out and flowing into the garden. So what that means is that Adam and Eve had even farther to go up. And yet they sinned. God said, "Where are you?" And they sinned. But ostensibly, if they would continue in faithfulness, God might have brought them and invited them higher and higher. God invites Abraham to bind Isaac, his son, to come up and worship me on this mountain. Come up. Come up here. After God brings the Israelites out from Egypt, he calls Moses and says, "Come up on this mountain with me. Come up here. I'll meet with you." 40 days and 40 nights. Moses meets with God, and he has such a close encounter with God like Adam and Eve must have had, that when he came down, his face was beaming with light. You see, Moses was able to maybe touch a foot back in the garden. Not totally, but he was right on that edge. He was on that mountain up where God was. So again and again, God creates an environment where we can be with him, and he invites us to come up and further in. If we were to go to the temple of Israel, which doesn't exist anymore, or the tabernacle, what we would see is steps as well as curtains. In other words, to go to where God is, not only do you walk forward and you go further in, you also go up steps and you go further up. God's always inviting his people further in and farther up. The book of Leviticus is a book of instructions for how Israel, how God's people can go further in and further up and go back to be with God again, just like Adam and Eve were. Just like Adam and Eve were. Stephen, how can that be true? I didn't see that when I heard it. Well, Leviticus 1 verse 2, let me read it for you again. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when any of you bring an offering." Okay, stop there. In the original version of this, in Hebrew, here's what it says. It says, when Adam brings an offering of livestock to the Lord, you shall bring your offering from the herd or from the flock. Leviticus doesn't use the word Adam again. I don't know, maybe not the whole book, but certainly not for the next number of chapters when it talks about all the sacrifices. But it introduces the sacrifice by saying, when Adam is going to make an offering, here's what he does. Now, Adam can mean humanity. And so here it could mean, and actually many think it does mean, a man or woman could offer an offering. So if your Bible says when anyone offers an offering, that's true. But what it literally says is Adam. Why? Because what God is saying is, hey, I'm going to provide a way for Adam, humanity, to go back to be where you were before. But it's not going to be exactly as it was before. It's going to be something new. Of course, we find that out as Jesus comes. He dies, he rises. He is the new temple, and then he sets up the new Jerusalem, the church, and the kingdom. And so Leviticus is a way back in, a way to have fellowship with God when we had turned away. When we had left God and sinned and worshipped other gods. When we've turned our back on God, God's saying, look, there's a way for you to come back. There's a way for you to come further in and further up. There's a way. You know, the Bible's all about God is giving us a way. We as Christians are called Christ followers because we follow the way. Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So being a Christian isn't just ideas, but it's a way, a journey, a way of living, a way that God has given us. And Leviticus is showing us what this way looks like. Now, as we are today celebrating our great holiday of July 4th, I was doing a little bit of research about July 4th. I was curious about when the fireworks started as a part of the celebration. I was curious about the fireworks because that's always a part of our celebration. And what I found was the first anniversary of our independence, July 4th, 1777, in Philadelphia, there was a ship who had its cannons firing 13 shots as signifying the 13 colonies. This was kind of the beginning of that firework tradition that we have now. Not only that, John Adams, he originated this idea, and he wrote this to his wife 2 days prior to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Here's what he said. And he wrote about how he thought the holiday should be celebrated. He said, this day will be most memorable in the history of America. And he said, I'm apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade. But listen to this. Bonfires and illuminations. Sounds like fireworks. Before they had the word fireworks. Bonfires and illuminations. Fire that's really bright. Like fireworks. And he says, from one end of this continent, to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. And so he's saying, look, this holiday is always going to be remembered by Americans. And on that day, July 4th, we're going to remember what happened all the way back then when we were brought from under the heel of the crown and brought into independence. And so this ship shot cannons, and later we have fireworks. They're shooting high up in the sky so that as we see the fireworks, our heart, our spirit leaps up with the fireworks. We leap up in joy just as we see all of those sparkles and shimmers in the sky. It'd probably be too dangerous for us to go 100 or 200 feet in the air, but the fireworks do it kind of in our place so that we can feel high and lifted up and have lifted spirits as we see them high up in the sky. And so each time we celebrate July 4th, we are, in a sense, reenacting and remembering the founding event of our nation. This is what founded us as a nation. This is what binds us together. This is the thing that happened that made us what we are. And without it, we wouldn't be what we are. Right? What is the founding event for Israel? Now, you can probably give a couple answers to this, but the one ultimate answer for this, I think, has to be what? Passover. When God, as He promised, brought His people up out of Egypt, and He brought the plagues, and the final plague with the death of the firstborn, remember, is if you don't have the blood of the Passover lamb on your doorposts, you're going to receive this last and final and most dreadful plague. And that by this blood, there's going to be a doorway opened up so that the people now can come out. They're going to go through the water of the Red Sea but not be drowned by it on dry land. They're going to go up, out, they're going to worship the Lord. That's the founding event of Israel. And here in Leviticus chapter 1, God is giving Moses a way for them to remember that event too. Not only is it a way like for Adam to go back into the garden, it's also a way for them to remember this is how you came out of Egypt. And you might be like, Stephen, how in the world is that true? Well, if you walk through, and we're going to do it in the Bible study coming up this Monday, we're going to walk through this. But what are they to do with the animal? The worshiper places his hand on it by saying, the animal is going to die in my place, is going to go up in my place, up in the cloud, up in the fire, to go up to be where God is. And then the animal is killed, but then the animal, its blood is sprinkled all around the altar. And when's the last time in the Bible blood sprinkled around something? Passover. So we should think this has something, it maybe has some kind of link with that. And Passover, it was around doorposts so that they could leave one place and go somewhere else. Now it's a new doorpost. Instead of a door facing side to side, this is a door that's facing bottom to up. And what's it a door to? It's not from Egypt to wilderness. It's from earth to heaven. It's a new doorway. It's a new doorway. And then the feet of the animal is washed, and the entrails are washed. It might remind us of how the people, as they went through the Red Sea, they were washed through the waters. I mean, they didn't even touch the waters, but they kind of brushed shoulders with the waters, but they weren't wholly consumed or died, but they came up out from the water to be with God. And so God here gives his people a way to come up out of Egypt, to go up to be where God is. Because that's what he's called all of us to. He's called all of us and said, I'm going to call you up out of the place you've been. What's Moses' name? Do you know Moses' name literally means drawn out? As a baby, what happened to him? He was in a basket and then drawn out. What about Noah and his family? They're in the ark and then they're drawn out. What about the people of Israel? They're going through the Red Sea and God drew them out. What about us when we're baptized, like Carter last year? He's in the water and we didn't dunk him, but you can get the imagery of he's through the water and God rescues him through the water. You see, God has called each one of us to come further in and further up. And you know what? Each one of you here has done that. Each one of you has already done that. Let me tell you, each one of you have already done it today. God has called, and without a shadow of a doubt, I know that God has called each one of you to, he said, come to me, and I want you to come in, I want you to come up. And each of you have already done that today. How? Well, how did you get in this room? You went up and you went in. Why is every church up on a couple steps or a bunch of steps? Because this is a holy mountain to meet with God. Where did Jesus eat his Last Supper? In an upper room. Where did the Spirit come down at Pentecost? In an upper room. You see, God didn't just meet with his people in high places in the Bible. He still meets with us symbolically in high places. We're up in a high place right now. Now, just a few moments ago when I was at Bethel Church, someone was telling me, I really need to go to the bank. I need to, get some of my accounts figured out. I really need to go in the bank. And I was just thinking about, a lot of banks, you go up into the bank. The banks have the big steps, they have the big pillars. Because banks have a level of authority. The bank itself should be trustworthy. They run the accounts. And they have authority, in a sense, over holding your money, even as the government has authority over them. If you had a big problem with the state, you'd go to the State House. And when you go to the State House, you go up the steps to meet with the governor. If you were in big trouble with the law, you'd go up to the steps to be in the courthouse. In some cases, if you wanted to find a really good book you couldn't find anywhere else, some libraries have a bunch of steps. You go up the library. Why? Because if you go up to the courthouse, it's up on steps because there's this level of authority of up there you're going to meet the judge. Right? Go up the courthouse up there, or the State House, you're going to meet the governor. You go up in the legislature and you're going to meet the senators. You go up into the library and you meet the one who has authority over all the books. But what about us right now? We've come up these steps to meet with not just a judge or an authority over a couple things, or an authority over some books, or an authority over, governance. No. We've come to meet with the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one who has authority over all of those things, everything. God Most High. So many of us, out of necessity, we have to go to the courthouse sometimes, or we have to go to the bank and go up those steps to meet with the judge or meet with the banker. But how is God calling you to go up and meet with Him? You've already done it this morning. We're here right now worshiping the Lord. But each day throughout the week, how might God be calling us in this wilderness time to meet with Him? I told you that going up, climbing somewhere high is costly. It cost my brother a couple stitches on his lip with a nail going through it. It cost the Wright brothers and their friends some broken bones and some others even death. Do you know what going up cost God? God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to come down to be with us, to come down to pitch His tent among us, so that He might go up on the Mount of Olives and sweat blood, so that He might be whipped in our place, that He might have a crown of thorns in our place, that He might go up on Calvary, have nails not just go through His lip, but through His wrists and His ankles, His feet, to suffer and die so that we might go up with Him. I told you going up's costly. It costs God everything. And if we are to go up with Him, we are to surrender everything to Him. Not just a little part of us. Not just to say, here's my Christian hat I wear. I put that Christian hat on Sundays. No, this is an everyday, whole life, everything you got, all or nothing. Are you following me? He says to us, come up. Come up. That's what He says in Revelation chapter 4 and chapter 11 to John. Come up here. The door is open. Come up. That's how Jesus, the last letter to the letter of the seven churches, Revelation 3, says, I'm at the door knocking. Open the door to me. If you open the door to me, I'll come in and I'll sup with you. My son Isaac, he's just old enough now, he's so proud of this, that he sits with us at the table. He can have a little kid chair now. And he used to, every time we ate, his eyes got really big. I want to join. What are they doing? I want to join. What are they doing? I want to join. And we just started feeding him cucumbers and zucchini and stuff. He started to eat like a big boy. And now he can sit in that chair. So what happened? He's given us the eyes, but he can't sit in that chair with us at the table unless we, mom and dad, invite him. Say, it's time, son. You can come up here. It's time. You can come up. And so what God's invited us to is He said, right here, it's time for you to come up. Just as Adam and Eve one day in the distant past ate from the tree of life, He's saying, now it's your turn. Little son, little daughter, little child though you are, it's time for you to come. I invite you up to eat with me. And so as we eat in just a few minutes, He invites us up here. May we be in prayer the rest of today and this week to ask God, where might you be sending me throughout the week? Where else might you be sending me to go? Knowing that it's costly. Knowing that it costs Jesus everything. Knowing that we will suffer and have to carry the cross too. Where is He calling us? As He says, come up. Come up here.